Have you ever heard people describe that instant when their existence shifted forever? Like a thunderous crash. A blow to the heart. Something massive and theatrical. Mine wasn't that way. It began softly. Just a murmur at the edge of my consciousness. Initially, I dismissed it. I was exhausted. My job had been stressful. Bianca seemed detached. Certainly, but relationships experience stages, don't they? Yet then it persisted. The murmur evolved into a steady drone. The type that burrows beneath your consciousness and causes your insides to clench. I couldn't articulate it precisely then, but I sensed something was amiss with Bianca. It manifested in subtle ways at first. Bianca previously left her phone scattered everywhere. Unlocked. Screen down on the kitchen surface. Charging in the corridor through the night. It never concerned us because we maintained transparency. But recently, it remained perpetually with her. Always secured. She'd transport it between rooms as if it were an infant. She wouldn't even use the restroom without it. I recall one evening she neglected it on the kitchen island for perhaps half a minute. And upon realizing, she dashed back as if she'd forgotten to extinguish a flame. That marked the initial moment I felt it internally. Something's wrong. One evening, I entered the living area to retrieve my charger and she startled. I mean, genuinely startled. Like, I'd interrupted her mid-transgression. She fumbled with her device, pressed something hastily, thrust it into her sweatshirt pocket pretending I hadn't observed. "What are you doing?" I inquired. She offered me a grin. All enamel and zero sincerity. "Christ, Larry, you startled me. Who were you messaging?" She blinked excessively. "What?" "Nobody. Just some professional matters. Work at 11:30 in the evening." She rolled her eyes and rose. "Seriously, Larry, not everything warrants suspicion. You need to cease being so distrustful." Distrustful? That term lodged in my sternum like a splinter. I wasn't being distrustful. I was being attentive. There's distinction. Following that evening, things began aligning. It was as though once I perceived it, I couldn't reverse my awareness. She commenced socializing more frequently. Beverages with her female friends, she'd claim business dinners, but she'd never divulge her companions. I'd ask which friends, and she'd state something ambiguous like, "You're unfamiliar with them invariably." Once I proposed collecting her simply out of courtesy. She adamantly declined. "No, I've already arranged transportation." She stated who. "I'll use Uber." I verified the application afterward. No Uber journey. That's when I detected her fragrance had altered. She formerly wore vanilla and sandalwood. Gentle. Recognizable. Now there was cologne. Intense, musky, and definitely not mine. There existed additional indicators too. Her laundry transformed. I discovered unfamiliar lingerie. I didn't recognize pieces she'd never displayed for me. I located receipts in the garbage for meals she never mentioned. On one occasion I even found a cinema ticket for a film she consistently claimed to detest. "Didn't you indicate you were working extended hours Tuesday?" I questioned her once. "Yeah, I faced a deadline." I presented the stub. "Then how did this materialize in your jacket pocket?" She examined it as if attempting to recall the date. "Oh, correct. I attended with Melissa post-work." Spontaneously. Melissa, her colleague, had relocated to Denver 90 days prior. That's when I ceased inquiring. I comprehended something crucial. Bianca wasn't merely deceiving. She was comfortable doing so. She presumed I'd never investigate further. Assumed I was just some monotonous spouse, too fatigued from employment to notice, but I noticed. Still I waited. I resisted accepting it. We'd been wed 8 years. We possessed property. Had aspirations. Constructed a shared existence. But instinctively, I recognized Bianca was escaping from me and someone else was drawing her. I didn't confront her. Not immediately. I observed silently, and then I began investigating. I refused to accuse her without evidence. I examined our financial records. Bianca exercised caution. Nothing conspicuous. But I discovered a secondary debit card linked to a communal savings account, one we hadn't accessed in years. Minor charges, coffee establishments, fuel stations, accommodation lounges. Distributed space. Just sufficient to avoid triggering alerts. I inspected her schedule. She had initiated marking professional retreats, conventions and female spa weekends every several weeks, but none corresponded with anything her occupation had ever conducted previously. Then I performed something I'm not proud of. I embedded a tracker in her vehicle, concealed beneath the dashboard where she'd never detect it. One Saturday, she informed me she was driving to a colleague's lakeside residence. Exclusively female, she said she even packed a carrier with wine and candles. I smiled and bid her farewell. Told her to unwind and enjoy herself. 60 minutes after her departure, I launched the tracker application. She wasn't proceeding northward toward the lake. She was navigating downtown. Then she halted. A skyscraper, identical building. Identical location. 3 consecutive weekends. Varying times, but consistently the same destination. I didn't venture there. Not immediately. But the void in my abdomen transformed into concrete. That night upon her return, I watched her enter as if nothing had transpired. She kissed my cheek and smiled. She even delivered a muffin. As if it were some variety of jest. I gazed at that muffin for 10 minutes before discarding it. That's when I acknowledged observation wasn't adequate. I required certainty. One Thursday evening, I informed her I had an unexpected conference. 2 municipalities away. I'd be absent overnight. Left her a counterfeit itinerary on the kitchen counter. Even packed a suitcase with formal attire. She scarcely examined it. Okay. Drive cautiously, she said, not even glancing up from her device. That's when I realized she no longer cared. I was a phantom in my own residence. I lingered down the street that night, parked in a neighbor's driveway. At precisely 10:52 p.m., the front entrance opened. Bianca emerged as if entering a fantasy. Hair styled, heels resonating down the driveway. Fitted jeans, ebony jacket. Complete cosmetics. Adorned in a manner she never did for me anymore. She didn't appear anxious. She appeared animated. I lifted my phone and captured an image through the windshield, one with her securing the door behind her, another as she entered her vehicle. I pursued her from 2 blocks behind, lights dimmed until we reached the primary thoroughfare. No indecision in her navigation. She knew her destination. Identical route, identical terminus. She entered the skyscraper as if she'd executed it countless times before. The security barrier opened for her. She didn't signal. That indicated someone inside had already authorized her. Or she possessed a code. Either situation, it wasn't her inaugural visit. She parked, exited the vehicle, adjusted her jacket and proceeded toward the foyer with her phone, pressed to her ear, chuckling. I captured another photograph. That one affected me more severely than anticipated. Her visage illuminated by the soft amber lights of the reception entrance. Eyes brilliant, lips curved in a smile intended for another. The variety of smile I hadn't witnessed in months. She appeared vibrant, as if this constituted her authentic existence. And I was the commercial intermission she endured. She traversed the doors and disappeared. I waited 120 minutes. No activity, merely the occasional rumble of the elevator. Several vehicles entering and exiting. Someone walking their canine across the thoroughfare. At 1:17 a.m. The entrance slid open again. Bianca emerged. Hair more disheveled now. Jacket unfastened. She had one hand in her pocket and the other still holding her device. She was conversing again, smiling, nodding, laughing. I captured one final image, her mid-laugh. Returning to her vehicle as if departing a cinema. She wasn't concealing like someone hiding an affair. She was walking like a woman who believed she'd evaded everything. And perhaps she had until now. That shattered something within me. Not merely rage. Clarity. Frigid and acute. I didn't pursue her after she departed. I remained there, stationed on the side street, allowing it to permeate. Everything had concluded. The confidence, the matrimony, the existence we'd constructed. All of it had previously terminated. I simply hadn't acknowledged it yet. But moments later, her vehicle appeared again. She exited carrying a small parcel. Perhaps something she acquired nearby. She re-entered the edifice as if settling for the night. Naturally she was. She wasn't returning home, and neither was I. I drove back to our dwelling, entered through the front entrance one final instance. No hesitation, no reconsideration. While Bianca was absent living her secondary existence, I was occupied erasing mine. I packed every one of my possessions carefully, systematically. Attire, documentation, my deceased father's timepiece, a container of photographs I couldn't bear to abandon. All of it transferred into 2 bags in the trunk of my automobile. Then I addressed the finances. I had established a private account weeks earlier, just in preparation. That night I relocated everything we had accumulated into it. Complete evacuation, the emergency reserve, the vacation cash, even the old anniversary account Bianca had disregarded. Vanished. I left $27.50 in our joint account. Just sufficient for her to assume the application was malfunctioning momentarily before the distress initiated. Then I deactivated my phone and destroyed the SIM. The sole item I left behind was a message. I located it in a storage container at the rear of the closet. A napkin from our wedding memorabilia. The one Bianca had preserved after I spilled crimson wine on it during our celebration. She termed it our first blemish, laughed and declared it charmingly authentic. I inverted it and inscribed in black ink. Ironic how blemishes endure longer than affection. Savor your liberation. I folded it once and positioned it on the kitchen counter. The silence in that dwelling was profound. You'd expect the location would vocalize at me, implore me to remain or echo some concluding memory. But it didn't. It was merely quiet. Deathly quiet. I surveyed the surroundings once more. Seized my keys and exited without securing the door behind me. Then I proceeded to accommodations for the night. The subsequent morning before departing the locality, I visited a legal representative's office to initiate divorce proceedings. I didn't want to dispute. I wanted severance. I displayed the photographs I had captured. Bianca departing the residence outside the skyscraper, laughing at 1 a.m. He didn't pose numerous inquiries. He merely nodded and commenced. By midday, I was halfway beyond the metropolitan area, traveling westward, windows lowered the breeze, eradicating the previous 8 years. I didn't know my destination yet, but I knew conclusively she wouldn't be capable of following. I discovered a serene locality, several states distant. Modest, unremarkable. I paid currency for a month-to-month rental. No virtual networks. No electronic correspondence, no telephone. I disappeared so effectively, I alarmed myself. The initial week I received no communication. Then information began filtering through the auxiliary number I provided to several individuals I still trusted. My cousin Janine contacted me from my former residence. Bianca appeared at my establishment weeping, inquiring if I'd communicated with you. I questioned, what did you respond? I informed her, you're a mature individual and if you're absent, you possess justification. Then I disconnected. Bianca appeared at my previous employment too, but I had already resigned. She submitted a missing persons declaration. The authorities inquired, made several calls, but it didn't advance significantly. No wrongdoing. I was legally permitted to vanish. She even appeared at my sister's residence. Identical dialogue. I merely wished to communicate with him. I'm concerned. My sister Mona didn't engage in pretense. You weren't concerned when you were intimate with someone else in a metropolitan apartment, were you? Bianca initiated crying, but Mona merely closed the entrance. I began to consider perhaps that marked the conclusion. But Bianca, she doesn't concede defeat. One Tuesday, I was consuming breakfast at a modest establishment. I occupied my customary position, sipping black coffee midway through my eggs when I observed her Bianca hair restrained. Sunglasses on the surface, sipping coffee as if she belonged there. My stomach plummeted. She glanced up and met my gaze, then smiled as if this were ordinary. As if nothing had occurred. I stood. I should have departed, but I didn't. Instead, I approached and slid into the booth opposite her. "What are you doing here?" I inquired, maintaining my voice subdued. "You're not that challenging to locate," she stated, composed as always. "You employed someone?" She didn't refute it. "Private detective. Worth every cent." I felt nauseated. "What do you desire?" "Bianca to converse." "I don't possess anything to express." "Well, I do," she stated, crossing her arms. "You degraded me. You seized everything and vanished. Who behaves thus?" "Someone who grew weary of being deceived." I stated more harshly than intended. She observed me. Her voice gentler now. "You didn't even provide me an opportunity to clarify." "You had months," I stated, "but you were too occupied sneaking to hotel lobbies and skyscrapers." Her mandible tightened. She didn't attempt to deny it. "You don't comprehend." "No," I interrupted, beginning to rise from the booth. "You don't. You failed. You simply hadn't recognized it yet. I initiated divorce proceedings, Bianca. We're finished." She extended, grasped my wrist. "You believe this is concluded?" I leaned in proximity. "I hope it is." Then I exited, but I knew it wasn't. The subsequent day I packed again. This occasion not out of trepidation, but strategy. I drove back to my former hometown, not the one Bianca and I inhabited. This was where I matured. Tranquil. Recognizable. Unnoticed, I maintained discretion. Contacted individuals she never knew. I still maintained communication with. Gradually I began to discover that her realm was disintegrating. The individual she abandoned me for gone. It emerged he possessed a spouse of his own. Bianca was unaware her finances in disarray. She was borrowing currency from acquaintances, relying on her progenitors, even attempting to dispose of adornments I'd purchased for her. One day she contacted me again. Somehow, she had obtained my new number. It constituted a lengthy, desperate communication, but I didn't respond. I merely altered numbers again. Weeks elapsed. Then months. She ceased attempting. I ceased glancing over my shoulder. Life became tranquil and remained thus. And for the first occasion in years, that sufficed. Thank you for viewing.